Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sharmin, and today in this video we will be learning how we can use grid to make complex layouts. So the layout that you can see on the screen right now, this is the layout that we will be learning. So here the main things that we will be learning is we will learn how to span rows and columns in grid. Okay, so that will be the main purpose. We won't be using the grid area property here. We will be using grid row start and grid row end, grid column start and grid column end. So those properties we'll be using, and we'll be learning how we can make this layout. I have a video on how to use grid, and it shows all the complex topics that are covered in grid. Okay, all of them are there in the video. I'll put the link in the description box below, and you can check that video as well. And also I have another video which shows about the layout, how to make a complex layout. There we have used a different concept to make that layout. So you can watch that one as well. I'll put the link in the description box below. So with that said, let's start. So in this video I will not be explaining to you what grid is from the start. So in this video I will only show you how you can put the concept of grid into practice. Okay, so we will be making this layout. So here I just have a blank, okay, not a blank but the basic boiler HTML code. And here I have a main parent div which has 4 divs inside of it. We have a total of 1, 2, 3 and 4. Alright, 4 different divs. So that is the reason I have one parent div and I have 3 children divs. Okay, so now let's copy this link, copy the path, paste it in here, and this is what we want to achieve, right? So let's start with the first step. Is we give a grid, alright, to our parent container. It will have a display of grid. So we start with here, and this parent container over here, let's give it a display of grid. Now the next step is defining columns and rows. Okay, so here if you look at the design over here, you see that you have 1, 2 and 3 columns, alright, and you can see that the first column is a slight larger than the second and the third column, right? It has little bit of more width. So what we will do here is we will define our columns. We will say grid template columns and let's say 1.5 fr, 1 fr and 1 fr. Okay, so we have these 3 columns here. So if you can see on the screen, you see that you have 3 different columns. Alright, let me zoom in for you to see it clearly. Now if you can see, you have 3 different columns of different sizes, right? The second and the third column is of the same size, but our first column is a slight more in width, okay, because it is 1.5 fr. So now the next thing that we will do over here is decide how many rows to define, correct? Now here you will have to think of how many rows will you have to define to achieve this layout. Now if you look at the layout, you might assume or you might think that 2 rows might suffice, right? But in 2 rows, like if you make 2 rows, how will you fit this element in there? Okay, it's between, right? Like it's in the center of the second and the third row, right? It's not in the second row, it's not in the first row, nor is it in the second row, right? So you want it to be in the center. So for that, to divide your rows, this is how you will divide your rows. Alright, so you see 1, 2, 3 and 4 different rows you will need to have. Here we have 3 different columns. We already defined columns because that was easy, but for rows it might confuse you. So that is the reason you can, if you see here, you have, this is your first, okay, the red lines here are your row lines. So this is your first line, and then you divide this one section, okay, because you want to fit this also, right? So for that you need a row line to define its start and the end. So that is the reason we make a total of 4 different rows, okay? So 4 rows, so that is the reason we have 5 different column lines. Alright, so now the first thing that we will do is define rows, and if you see, our rows are same in size, right? We have 4 rows and all of them are same in size. So we can define 4 different rows to our grid. Here we can say, okay, let me zoom it so that it is clearly visible. Okay, so here we say grid template rows, and here we say repeat it 4 times. Okay, we want 1 fr to be repeated 4 times. Okay, so we write the number of repetition first. So here we say repeat 4 times 1 FR. Alright, so now we get different rows also. We get 4 different rows of the same size. So if you hover over the grid, you will see that you have 4 rows and 3 columns. Alright, and also if you click over here, you will be able to see the row lines over here. This, okay, so 1 2 3 4 and -1 is the last one, and this is 5 here. Okay, so these are your row lines and these are your column lines, 1 2 3 and 4. You have 4 column lines because you have 3 columns, and you have 5 row lines because you have 4 rows. Alright, so this is how you will define your grid. Okay, the first thing that you have to do is when you get the design, just try and analyze the design and just try and think that how many rows and how many columns you will require to put in the elements properly in place. Okay, here if you looked at the layout and thought of 2 rows and 3 columns, then that would have not worked, right? Because what about this element then? So you have to think about each and every element before deciding the number of rows and columns that you are giving to your grid. Alright, so we did our first step, that was defining rows and columns. Now the second step is we have to see to which element do we have to span in how many rows and how many columns. Alright, so for that we will start with our first element here. So this is our child 1. So to our child 1, we want it to grid row start, we want it to start from 1, okay, and we want it to end grid row end, we want it to end till the last row, right? Start from 1 and end till 5. You can also put a 5 over here, okay, and -1 also means the last row line, okay, it means last. So even if you enter -1 or you enter 5, it means one and the same. So this is one way of writing it, but if you want to make it even shorter, then what you can do is just define grid row and say 1, the starting point of your row, slash, and say -1 or 5, okay, whatever you are comfortable with, it's your choice totally. So if you define this, then this is a shorthand property for grid row start and grid row end. Okay, so similar to this, you also have grid column, which again is a shorthand for grid column start and grid column end. So we will be using this shorthand in place of writing it so long. So let's just remove both of these. Let's give it a background color of black, or maybe let's pick the background color from here itself. We have our Figma here, so let's pick this color directly from here and you paste it here. And we also want the font color to be white. So yeah, we copy our CSS from here and we paste it in our sheet over here. Okay, this is for our first element, and also for the grid that we just used, let's paste that also here. So this comes our parent grid code and this is our first child elements code. So now the second thing that you need to see here is you give it a grid column of 1 by 2. Alright, so 1 by 2 is you wanted to start from grid column line 1 and column line 2. Always remember your row lines are sleeping lines and your column lines are standing lines. Okay, so horizontal and vertical, always remember that. So now the second thing over here, our second element, if we see, it starts from row line 1 and ends at row line number 3. Okay, so here we will say grid row 1 by 3. Okay, start from 1, end at 3, and we say grid column of 2 by 3, and let's give this also a background color of the color from here, this yellow color. So we copy and we paste it over here. Okay, so you got this second element of yours in place. Alright, so here we go with the second element. Now the third element, if you see, let's give this number 3, and here if you see, your column line starts from 3 to the last line. Okay, you might call it 5 or -1, whatever. I prefer calling it -1. So this is, and the column will remain the same because it's in the same column as of your second element, right? And the third element will start from, the fourth element here will start from row line number 2 and end at row line number 4. So let's pick up the color from here for our third element that we gave here. So we paste it there, and for our fourth child over here, let's say a grid column of, you want 3 by 4, right? This is the column, so column line 1, 2, 3 and the fourth. Okay, so 3 to 4, correct? And the grid row will be grid row, and you say 3 by 4, I guess, sorry, it's 2 and 4, okay, 2 until 4, so you say 2 by 4. And okay, we'll give it a background color later on. So here, if you put this, and let's pick the background color from here, and let's paste it over here. So we say background color, and we want this color, alright. And now when you refresh, you will see that it somewhat looks like what we actually want, right? But it does not look similar to what we want it to really look like, right? So for that, now you can give values to your grid rows maybe. Okay, so let's just give it, instead of 1 FR, let's give it a value of 200 pixels maybe. Okay, I think 200 is very large. Let's give it a maybe 100 pixels. Okay, or even smaller if you want. So maybe 80. So it looks good now. So let's keep this 100 only. Okay, let it be 80. Doesn't matter. Actually, our screen is not at 0, so that is the reason it looks very big. So if we go to a screen of 100, then it looks fine, right? So we had our screen zoomed in. That was the reason. Let's give it 100 pixels of height for our each column. So let's say 100 pixels, repeat 4 times. And we also want a gap, right? We have a gap between these. We also have a border radius. So we have this class called child that is being applied to all of them, right? So let's copy that class itself, and let's give it, okay, I messed it all up. Okay, so here you need to give it a border radius of 10 pixels maybe, a slight border radius, and here we can give it a grid gap. Okay, I'm sure if you know grid, then you might be aware of this property as well. It is used to give gap between your columns and rows. Okay, so grid gap of 20 pixels maybe, and you save, and here you refresh, and a layout very similar to what we have here, right? It doesn't exactly look like this, but very close to it, right? So now what we can do is, to the body, let's give it a flex so that we get it in the center, and we say body, and we want to give it a display of flex, and we want to align our items in the center. We want to justify content also center, and let's give it a height of 100 VH, or else it won't come in the center vertically. Alright, so now if we refresh, we have this perfectly in the center. Alright, so this is how you make your layout in grid. Okay, now looking at this, let's see what we have given this element here. Okay, so here we have that element, okay, directly inside the div. So let's give this div some padding maybe. Okay, so let's give this some padding of maybe 40 pixels. Okay, we give it a padding of 40 pixels. We give it a font size of 32 pixels. Alright, so you have this over here. You have your padding. Okay, we don't require this, and we also don't require any of these. Okay, cool. So we have padding, and we also have, let's give our grid some, or maybe this one some width, maybe 60% of the entire width that we have. Okay, so we refresh. It's not working, so let's give maybe this one a width of 60%. Okay, so this we get it in the center, right? Now the only difference here in our layout is the font, so let's not open the inspect, and directly here let's define a font family. So we say font family, and let's say Poppins, and we refresh, and here you go, you have your, so we have our font weight to be bold and maybe our padding to 35 pixels. And when we refresh, let's get this down to 30, and now you can see that you have the exact same layout that we have in the design here, right? It might look a little bit different. You have to take a note of proper widths and heights of the, when you get the design, and then you can implement that in your using CSS. Alright, so this is what I wanted to teach you guys today, that how you can use row span and column span in grid, and you can make different complex layouts. Okay, this was not really a very complex layout. This was just like an okay layout. The only challenge here was putting the fourth div in the place where it is right now. Okay, so it would have been difficult if you would have used floats and stuff, and again with flex that would have been possible, but then you might have to make 3 different divs and then 3 different parent divs, and then in each of the div you put this and then give it width and all things like that, and grid makes it very easy. So a few things to keep in mind if you're using this way. Okay, this way if you're using to make your grid layouts, then remember, if you go into your mobile and you, like when you are making your site responsive, you might face this problem that your layout looks really messed up and you have no idea why is that happening. Okay, this happened to me in the start. I used to use this way, and then when I used to go for responsive, I used to keep wondering that why is this happening. Then I understood that if I want to get it back to, like, even if you give it a grid of just one FR column and one FR row, still it will look messed up. So to put all those things together and to make it look like it was before, like directly in your HTML, what you'll have to do is you will have to set your grid row and grid column properties for each of your element to initial, okay, to the starting value that it was. I mean by default, whatever value it had, you have to assign it to the default value, and then only you can set it again. Maybe you want to use flex, or maybe you want to use just display inline or floats in your phone, or during making it responsive in your tablet or anything, like the tab resolution 768 or mobile 320, 480, whatever. So in those resolutions you have to set the grid row and grid column properties to initial, so that you can set it up again as you want them to look like. Okay, so yeah, hope this video helped, and if you like this video and got to learn something out of this video, then do not forget to press that subscribe button and also press that like button if you really like the video. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Have a good day, and let's meet in the next video. Bye guys.